The first demo is by an accomplished sous vide cook, presenter, and cookbook contributor, as well as the co founder and CEO of the International Sous Vide Association. He has helped organize more than a dozen sous vide conferences, including all three annual sous vide summits, which draw hundreds of attendees, speakers, and chefs from around the world. When he's not organizing international events, he cooks for his wife and two children. He still has a tender spot in his heart for his first Sancerre sous vide machine that sent him down this journey, and he has never met an animal he wouldn't like to eat. Please help me welcome from the ISVA, Mike Charite.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Culinary Classic Showcase. I'm super excited to be here putting together this demo for y'all, and I was really excited about this topic. There's so many dishes from different cultures around the world that are considered classics, but that can really benefit from sous vide. I think at our last sous vide summit, Simon Majumdar's presentation about sous vide around the world really hit home on a lot of cultural dishes that are just perfect for the sous vide method. Took me a while to come up with a topic because there's just so many great options that I love to cook. I decided to go with a French dip sandwich. Nothing kind of beats that comfort level for me. I have lots of memories growing up of a couple restaurants in my neighborhood that just had an incredible prime rib French dip. So we're going to do that a little bit different today. You can see I'm starting out with a New York strip loin. This one, about a third of the whole strip loin, probably about 5 pounds. And you can see two things. I pre-seared it, and that's because we're going to chill it and then we're going to slice it. So we're not going to actually heat it before it gets sliced. So I wanted to sear it now. And the other thing I did that you'll notice, and I'm probably going to get lambasted for this in the comments, is I removed the fat cap. I don't like big chunks of fat in my French dip sandwich. But what I did do, I took a page out of Chef Eric Villegas' book from the Sous Vide Summit a couple years ago, where he took beef suet and he rendered it down into tallow. So what I did was I took all the trim from this, all the fat cap, everything I took off, and I put it in a bag with some rosemary, with some thyme, a little bit of garlic, and I cooked that at 183 degrees for about 7-8 hours. And I ended up with this beautiful, almost a cup, just from the trim on this roast, of just this beautiful, now flavored tallow that we're going to use. So we took the fat cap off, but we're going to actually cook the roast in the tallow. So it's going to almost kind of confit. We're going to add some extra flavor that way and make sure it stays nice and juicy. So the other thing I did with this roast was I seasoned it with salt yesterday pretty heavily, and then I dry brined it in the fridge overnight. So that lets the salt really penetrate the meat. We don't have to add a lot more right now. So I'm going to just get this guy bagged up, and then we're going to use probably, 2 or 3 tablespoons of this rendered tallow. We're just going to kind of pop that in there. It'll obviously melt back down as it's cooking. And then we're going to also use some of this when we make the roux for our au jus. So we're going to add a whole lot of good flavor that way. So put that tallow in there. I'm going to seal this up. I'm going to cook it at 131 degrees, probably for about 7 or 8 hours. Because I find with New York strip, a little longer gives it just some extra tenderness. And then once that's done, I'm going to bring it down, quickly cool in an ice bath and refrigerate it. So next time you see this guy, it will be fully cooked and ready for slicing. All right, to go with our French dip today, we are going to make a classic sous vide roasted potato. This is one of my favorite preparations for potatoes, and it's great because for meal prep, you can prep a bunch of these in advance, vacuum seal them, cook them, chill them, and then you can hold them in the fridge for a couple of weeks or even freeze them, and then they're ready to go just to crisp up under the broiler when you're ready. So I'm using Yukon Gold potatoes. I also like red potatoes. I really like doing this recipe with the little mini fingerling potatoes and just doing those whole. It works out really well. So we're just going to do a nice little like 1/2 inch kind of chop. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just want the sizes to be relatively consistent, so that way it all cooks at the same speed. But you definitely want more of a waxy potato for this. Russet I wouldn't use for this preparation. A lot of times when I do this, I'll just toss them with a little olive oil and some rosemary. I also really like the Sabatino Tartufo brand. they have a truffle zest that is just fantastic this way. So once we chop them up, you can see just pretty simple chops, so they're all relatively the same size. I'm going to vacuum seal these and just naked. I'm not putting any spices in there because at the end we're going to toss this with a chimichurri sauce. So we'll put a little salt at that point, but we don't want to over season them now because that sauce is going to bring a ton of flavor, once we're done. So vacuum seal, cook at 183, 185 Fahrenheit for about an hour, and then you can either chill them down, store them in the fridge, or I'll show you the prep. We'll just finish them in the oven. All right, so now we're going to get started with our au jus, which is the dip we're going to use for our French dip. So in this pan, I've got about 1/4 cup of that rendered flavored tallow that we did. So I'm just going to turn that on, and I'm going to heat it over low heat so it doesn't burn right now. We're kind of around 240 degrees, right about where things will start to come up to a simmer. And so we're going to get that all melted down. And then we're going to stir in some flour. The ratio here is about 3-to-1 fat to flour. So it's going to be a really kind of loose roux. Turn this down a little bit because we do not want it to boil. And then we're just going to whisk the flour into the fat. Now some of you may be thinking, hey, there's a roux in here. This is more of a gravy than it is the jus. I get it. I can see that. Recipes out there kind of go both ways, honestly. And I'm kind of taking a little inspiration from our French dip from the Italian beef sandwich. So while, a typical jus doesn't have a lot of extra flavorants, you're not adding the, the herbs to it and all of that kind of stuff. The Italian beef has a little bit more of that kind of herbal quality to it. It's a little bit thicker. So we're kind of going in the middle here. Turn this back up a little bit. All right. And so we're going to do this just to let it kind of caramelize a little bit. All right. So we're going to cook this just for a couple of minutes until we start getting a little color on the roux. We don't need a lot. And it's already, because it's got that beef tallow, it's not a typical white roux. Where you, like with butter, it would be a lot lighter. This already has some brown to it, so I'm just going to give that a couple of minutes to cook down in there a little bit. And then we're going to add some red wine in just a second. So what's really nice about this recipe is you can totally make this ahead. You can do this 2 or 3 days in advance. It's good in the fridge for probably 3 to 4 days. So, make it, cool it, store it in an airtight container, and then just reheat it in a pan when you are ready to have your sandwiches. I'm going to add just a little red wine, probably about 1/4 cup. We're going to cook this for about 2 minutes until the alcohol smell is gone. Alright, so we've been cooking our wine down a little bit. We're getting rid of that alcohol smell. So at this point, we're going to add in about 1/4 of beef stock. I like to use the unsalted or low sodium because we can always add more later. Obviously, this would be better with homemade stock, but I'm in between trips, didn't have a chance to make some, so we're using just a good store-bought brand, which is totally okay in a pinch. So we're going to empty that in there. And then we're going to also add just a little bit of granulated garlic. Okay, and then whisk away to make sure that all those clumps, we don't get a whole lot of clumps from the roux. You want to whisk this quite vigorously as it comes up to temp and just keep whisking. All right, the other thing I'm going to add in here while we whisk away is some porcini mushroom powder. This stuff is really, really awesome for adding depth to a sauce. Just adds, without it tasting, completely mushroomy, it's going to add just a lot of umami and depth to it. So we're going to move this off the heat a little bit. We're going to just give this a little taste. Remember, we haven't added any salt yet, so we want to do that now at this point. It's amazing. Just from infusing the herbs into that fat, really get a lot of that flavor. There's a lot of depth from the mushroom, so we're going to add a couple good pinches of salt, probably about a teaspoon or so for now. And then we're going to whisk all that in. Going to add just a bit of freshly ground black pepper. Just a touch more salt. Perfect. All right. So now all we got to do is just, finish up the meat, let that cool, we'll slice it, and then we'll assemble our sandwiches. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make just a little condiment to put on our French dip sandwich. This is a little non-traditional, but I like flavor. So I'm using this creamy Parisian sauce from the Plating Grace and Grub food truck. And you guys may remember that from the last summit. They were our charity, the Table Foundation, who owns the truck. Our charity of choice. They work with people coming out of the prison system or coming from disadvantaged backgrounds with an internship. So we just started bottling the sauces, and this creamy Parisian is flavors of herbes de Provence. It's a white wine reduction with garlic, really delicious. So we're going to just make a little sandwich spread here. Super simple. So all I have here is just a little bit of mayo, a couple tablespoons, and just going to add some of the creamy Parisian to that. I'm going about a 1-to-1 ratio, maybe a little heavier on the creamy Parisian side. And so just help give it a little body so it'll spread a little bit better on our bread. So we're just going to mix that up. They've got a total of 5 different sauces. They're international comfort food. So their founder created them from his travels around the world. There's a Latin chimifresca that we're going to use on the potatoes. There's also an Asian island sauce, an Italian seaside, and a barbecue SA. So here we go. Just like that, we've got a nice little sandwich spread. We're going to set that aside for now. We'll come back to that in a minute. The other thing that we finished up, I pulled our potatoes out, chilled those down overnight, so they're cold right now, but they've been perfectly cooked. And remember, when we bagged these, we didn't season them, and we're still not going to do a lot to them because they're going to get tossed in that chimichurri sauce. So just going to go a little bit of salt, kind of spread over because we want to flavor in layers here. And then I'm going to toss them with a little bit of garlic powder. And then these are basically going to go in an oven cold, about 425 degrees. And it'll take about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more or less. And they'll start to crisp up. And then we'll pull them out and toss them with the sauce. So I'm going to get these in the oven, and we'll come back and prep the meat. All right, now we're back with our beef prep. Time to slice this baby. So you can see our strip loin. Again, we didn't season this before it went in the bag, other than that dry brine that we did overnight. And we pre-seared it. We bagged it up, cooked it for about 8 hours at 131, and then I chilled it down. So it's cold right now, which is going to make it slice a lot easier. These slicers are available all over the place. I've been looking for an excuse to get one, so this video was perfect for that. But you can see next to me, I have that au jus that we made yesterday heating back up, and I'm using the probe mode on the Breville Polyscience Control Freak. What's awesome about this is it's going to heat that jus right back up to 130 degrees where I've set it. So when I reheat this meat in the jus, it's not going to overcook it. It's going to stay at this perfect medium rare that we've worked so hard to achieve. Not really, with sous vide it's not that hard, but so we're just heating this back up on probe control mode, and once it gets to 130, we're going to just put our meat in there to heat up before we plate the sandwich. So we'll just do a few slices here. Goes without saying, but if you're using a slicer like this, be super careful. It doesn't matter if it's a roast or your fingers, it will slice it. So, and I have this set pretty thin. I am just about 1.5 on the meter, so you can see very thin. It's just starting to come apart. And I don't want these to be thick for the sandwich. It's going to be super tender. So we're just going to kind of pull some of this out. I'm telling you, this looks so delicious. I think I'm gonna have to give it a try right now. Let's just see how we did. It's amazing with that dry brine how much the salt penetrates the meat. And again, we put no extra seasoning when it was in the bag, but it is just perfectly seasoned right now. So I'm gonna go through and slice all this up, and then once our au jus comes to temperature, I'm gonna just put some slices in there, and we'll let it heat up, and then when we come back, we'll build our sandwich. All right, after all this work, it's time to put this perfect classic French dip together. So first thing we've got, just a nice hoagie roll, French bread, any roll that you like will work, ciabatta. And I've heated that in the oven a little bit. Let me just take a little bit of our spread. You don't want to go too heavy with this because we don't want to overpower the rest of the sandwich, but we're going to just kind of spread a little bit of that on both sides. Okay, there's one. And again, this is that creamy Parisian sauce with the herbes de Provence, garlic, a white wine reduction, a little bit of mayo in there to kind of give it some extra body for the sandwich. All right. Now we're going to take our meat. And again, this has been heating up here at 130 degrees with on probe control. I'm just using a slotted spoon to kind of get most of that jus out. And you can look at that. It's still perfect medium rare. Man, this is going to be good. And I'm using about 6 ounces of meat per sandwich. I find that to be a pretty good ratio. And with that size that we had, which is about a third of a whole strip loin, and probably 4 or 5 pounds, we'll get a good couple sandwiches, or 4 sandwiches out of that. So we're going to let that sit there for a second, dry off. Then we're going to pull that. We're going to just start layering this meat on our bread, trying to keep it even. I'm going to shake off that sauce so we don't want to make our bread too soggy here. Man, this smells incredible. Got the herbs. It's amazing how much the herbs come through after we just infuse that tallow and then kind of confit the beef in there. It's amazing how much that still comes through. Okay, got that. Now I keep my French dip pretty simple. Could you add cheese? Sure. Could you add peppers and onions? Make it your own. But simple's the name of the game for me for a good French dip. We give that a slice. On the bias, of course. Then we're going to kind of plate that up there. Take our little glass ramekin and a ladle. We'll pull some of that amazing jus. Now all we got to do is finish our potatoes. So we're going to pull those out. You can see that a little bit, just nice and crispy on top. That's what we're looking for here. I'm going to set those up here. So in this bowl, I've got another one of the food truck sauces. This is the Latin Chimichurri Fresca. So lots of herbs, some Anaheim peppers that are not spicy in there. And then I added a little extra olive oil just to kind of make it a little more tossable here. So we're going to spoon our potatoes into that bowl. Okay. And then all we want to do is just give these a nice little toss to coat. Doesn't take much. This sauce packs a punch, so I've got probably a couple tablespoons of it in here. Let me bring that over, give you a look. There you go. Don't those look fantastic? So we are going to just take these, plate them right next to our beautiful French dip. I'm telling you, you can't get Much more flavorful than this combination here. So here we have the perfect culinary classic dish. Sous vide French dip with that New York strip cooked for about 8 hours. A nice flavorful jus and those chimichurri potatoes. So I really hope y'all enjoy this recipe. I'm going to dig in and enjoy my lunch. But we will see you at the next showcase. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everyone, what did you think about Mike's demo? I love seeing him get to work in the kitchen. He does a lot of really cool things. He's also going to be joining me on stage, I believe. There he is. So if you have questions in the comments, great job, Mike. It was great to see that.
Thanks. It's something I've been wanting to try for a while. Just had to wait till I got the slicer. So it was a perfect time for that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think everyone was definitely coveting your slicer. It's one of those things that I think a lot of us struggle to justify getting, but would all like.
I mean, a French dip is a perfect justification for me. My wife didn't necessarily agree with me, but that's okay.
There are a few questions about the New York strip that you were cooking and why. I think you cooked it for like, how long did you cook it for?
I think I did 8 hours on it. Yeah, and just with New York strip in general, I find a lot of times they just need a little bit of extra time to get super tender. So where I would cook a ribeye for like 2 to 3 hours, I usually go around 5 with just a standard, inch and a half steak. So when it being bigger like that, like you said in the comments, it takes almost 5 hours just to heat through. Plus, I just added a few extra hours for tenderness, and I don't think that's super crucial. There's a range there, anywhere from like 6 to 10 hours. I think would be fine, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, and that's kind of my go-to for strip steaks too, is like the 4 to 8 hours, just because I like that little bit of extra tenderization, especially if it's not a prime strip. You get kind of the benefits of some of the fat of marbling from a strip steak, but then you also tenderize it a little bit more, so it's a little more enjoyable to eat, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
One sec, Lisa's having trouble hearing. I think she just needs to refresh her window. That usually
if you guys are having
it,
sound issues, just do a quick refresh and it should fix it.
Yeah, I put it in the comments because if she's having sound issues, she won't be able to hear you. Tell her to refresh the window.
Smart. See, this is why you're the big boss and I just follow your orders.
And some people were saying even for thick steaks, they tend to cook them, for just a few hours, and it's good enough for them. And I think that's something that's worth talking about as well. That because of delta T cooking, which is basically the difference in how meat heats based on the temperature, if you cook something that's 2.5 inches thick, it does take just over 5 hours to heat through. But if you cook it for 3 hours, it actually gets to, instead of like 131, it might get to like 128 in that time. So it's very, very close, and it's close enough that a lot of us can't tell the difference. And that's where some machines like the Polyscience Hydro Probe Plus and the Innova Precision Oven can use a probe and can automatically offset the times. You can start cooking at a higher temperature and or lower it as it gets closer, because you make huge gains at the very beginning of that cook time. You can actually get really close to your final temperature and shave off 30 to 50% of the cook time.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing just by adding a couple degrees. Like when you look at the bell charts, how long it takes to get those last couple degrees. It's wild. That shocked me the first time I looked at it.
Yeah, I posted a link in the comments to the article and talk I did. I think it was at the Sous Vide Summit that kind of dove into how Delta T works and how cooking meat heats. There's one of those fascinating things when I dove into it, because I also wasn't kind of expecting that meat heats in, very much like a weird curve as opposed to a straight line.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the things you used was porcini, I think, mushroom powder. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the benefits of that. I got a container of it, and I haven't used it yet because I am not quite sure how to do it. So it's I'm curious to get the answers from the expert.
Yeah, I add it to everything. I mean, it really just adds a little earthiness and that kind of depth, the umami, that mushrooms are famous for. So I'll dust a little bit on a steak. or like any sort of reduction or sauces, especially if it's beef based, I add a little bit to it, just because it adds another layer of depth. I also really like the truffle zest from Sabatino Tartufo. They basically dry the truffles and then they grind it up so it's like a powder, and so that I use on potatoes and stuff a lot to finish them. But it's amazing how you don't need much. A little bit goes a really long way, but it adds just a really nice kind of earthy punch to it.
Awesome. Well, now I feel like I have the confidence now to pull that out next time I make something. I'll have to give it a shot.
Yep. And to Linda's point, just go on Amazon. I don't know if where you are, but Amazon is where I usually buy it. They have several different options and varieties of it.
George asked, have you tried to sous vide the potatoes and then finish them in the deep fryer? It seems like it would make for a great all-finger meal.
So that was actually my initial plan with this video, was to try it because I haven't finished them in the fryer. I kind of wanted to do on the Innova app, and I've seen other blogs that have done this, do the 2-stage frying for French fries. So you par cook them, then you do like a low 275 fry, and then you do something higher. Honestly, I was in between trips and didn't want to deal with frying. That was the reason I didn't. But it's something that's on my list to try for sure. I love Kenji has a really good recipe for these crispy potatoes, and I had him at his restaurant in
San Mateo.
Gosh, outside of San Francisco, whatever that city is called.
San Mateo, right? Isn't that where
there you go. I was totally blanking, but yeah, they were fantastic because you get that soft center, but uber crispy on the outside. I saw Dale mention the air fryer, which I don't have, but I do have an Innova Precision oven, which does convection, and supposedly you can air fry in that. So I'll have to try that too next time.
Yeah, I've done the twice cooked potatoes and works out pretty good. It's like a lot of things. It's easy to cook it exactly how you want in sous vide, and then you can kind of finish it using any traditional method that you want.
Well, and I think that's how they do like frozen fries, is they par cook it, then they do the first fry, and then they freeze it. So I'm imagining you could do a whole bunch at once and then just put them in your freezer in portions and then just pull it out, do that last fry to finish them.
I'll do that with chicken wings as well. Cook those sous vide just to tenderize them, and then you can freeze them, and then when you want to eat them later, you can just throw them in the deep fryer or throw them in the oven. Throw them on the grill, just crisp them up a little bit. So
yeah, it's awesome.
Paul says years ago they did a double fry at McDonald's as well. That makes sense. It's definitely changes the starches, is I think what happens when you do the double cook with them, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Mike, thanks for joining us on stage. Thanks for the great video. I'm now starving for a good French tip. It's one of my favorites. So I appreciate you diving into all kind of the aspects of the sandwich and stuff. It was awesome.
Absolutely. Well, great to be back with y'all, and we'll see you next time.